Namaskar. I am Dr. Dhananjay Kelkar, Medical Director, Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, and with me we have today Dr. Rajan Joshi, who is the Chief of Pediatrics and Neonatology Services in Mangeshkar Hospital. Today we are communicating with you about a very important topic which has been neglected throughout this COVID infection, and that is COVID in pediatric age group. There have been many miscommunications and fallacies as to whether children get affected by COVID, whether they have any risk of COVID, whether they can transmit COVID, and in order to reduce these misconceptions as well as to share our experience in Mangeshkar Hospital, we have invited Dr. Rajan Joshi today for this COVID update part 3, which is pediatrics and COVID. So, Dr. Rajan Joshi, in order to go to the subject of pediatrics and COVID, we will discuss some figures about. Now we have treated about 6,000 COVID positive patients in Mangeshkar Hospital, and I am sure number of them must have been pediatric cases. So can you share the number of COVID cases, overview of that data, and kind of what did you find in this overview of pediatric COVID?
As rightly stated by Dr. Kelkar, we too had the same conception that basically pediatric COVID is just not there, and the world literature also supported that. Dinanath saw its first adult COVID positive adult patient on 22nd of March. It took almost a month, that is till 18th of April, for the first pediatric COVID positive child, whereby I mean anybody from neonate till 18 years of age, to come to us. We thought this is a rare occurrence, but to our surprise, this was just the beginning. Subsequently, till the 31st of July, we have seen 262 COVID positive children. Agreed, many of them were asymptomatic or just mildly symptomatic, but some of them came with symptoms too. Initially, with the government regulations of compulsorily hospitalizing them, 93 of them were hospitalized. However, with the home quarantine protocol being followed, subsequently 169 patients were managed on home quarantine. At least 3 of these children, less than 1 year, came to us with primary symptoms, with no other family members being symptomatic, and to our surprise, all the adults got themselves tested for contact tracing, but they were negative. They were the child was the only positive case in the family. We also had one positive neonate, and out of these admissions, 4 pediatric patients required oxygen. One of them was serious enough to require very high intensity critical care.
Before we move on to the specific cases or maybe critical cases in pediatrics, what preparation and infrastructure changes did you make in the pediatrics department in terms of the COVID and non-COVID buildings, staff, or any training programs that we would like to know as a guide to other pediatric centers?
Fortunately, from the adult experience, we soon realized this COVID is not something to be trifled with. It was not something that you are going to get just one rare case and you are going to make a separate room or separate ward for it. So, our institute realized the magnitude of the problem much before it occurred. So, we were probably the only institute of I know where we have a separate COVID NICU, separate COVID PICU. By means, it was not just a partition of a NICU or PICU which was made COVID or non-COVID, but we had a separate building. We had a separated NICU which was for COVID patients, separate PICU, a separate pediatric ward for COVID patients, and our OPD and triaging for COVID suspects was not only separate from the non-COVID, but it was separate from the adults, because we really cannot expect adult physicians or medical officers to look after children. And with this triaging, counseling, home quarantine was entirely managed by senior consultants. So, we throughout the day we had pediatric consultants who were on COVID duty. So, no child went home, counseled about home quarantine or was hospitalized just on the advice of medical officers or residents. We made it a mandate that it has to be seen by a consultant. In case the patient did come at odd hours after consulting hours, then we also made it mandatory that the parents have to talk to the consultant on phone and next day has to follow up with the consultant. So, the triaging was done entirely at consultant level, because you know that it is very difficult to triage children. In adults, you had triaging rules like you could do a 6 minutes or a 4 minutes walk, you could do a pulse oximeter. To keep a child even still for a few seconds or minutes is a challenge. So, it has to be seen by pediatricians. So, we could not follow the adult rules. So, it had to be seen from a pediatrician's perspective to know which child was sick or not. And in the home quarantine sector, we made it a point that they had to frequently report to us. It was not just enough sending pulse ox readings. So, we made it a point that at least they had to call us daily, or if they did not call us, we made it a point that we would call them back every day at least once. If anybody who did not defaulted, we then said that you had better be in a hospital.
Coming to the next question, which is trying to find a pattern of pediatric COVID here. Number one is whether other illnesses like dengue or influenza or other pediatric illnesses, typhoid, cholera, I do not know what is there in the monsoon season, are those numbers less as compared to, let us say, last year 2019 or 2018? And the second question is, out of these pediatric cases, were there any serious cases? Because the literature says that children do not have ACE2 receptors in the concentration that adults have. So, if they do not have ACE2 receptors, can they get a more serious way of COVID infection? Do they require oxygen at all? Do they really need hospitalization, or can they be managed at home?
Regarding the concept that pediatric patients are spared from COVID because of the absence of ACE2 receptors, that is conjectural and speculative. Some people have made other speculations saying that because the children are constantly receiving vaccines, so they are in a hyperimmune state, they are already, their immunity is triggered. But then this does not hold true, because what about newborns who have never received a vaccine? They were also sick. As regards your question, yes, we were absolutely morbidly scared that this time, as every year in July, where H1N1 flu or the common seasonal flu or the dengue comes, I said if this is going to strike us, then we are going to be in a real mess, because COVID plus dengue and all these illnesses present with fever. So, we will not be able to know which child is dengue, which child is COVID, which child is flu. But I would say that because of social distancing, because of patients taking parents taking care, because the children being kept at home, we have been spared this time. In fact, the dengue numbers or the numbers of all other infectious diseases is strikingly low, levels to which we have never seen probably in the last 10 years of our practice. Regarding the seriousness of the children, we had only one child who was really sick and we thought we would lose him and who would possibly go on a ventilator. Other 4 required oxygen, but there has been a peculiar case of pediatric multi-systemic inflammatory disease following COVID, which we saw only one, other places have reported, and this is peculiar to the pediatric population, that after the COVID attack, these people get multisystemic illnesses just like collagen vascular disease, and these are quite serious, but otherwise the number of serious cases is definitely low.
And did this child who was on high flow nasal oxygen survive, become well, or worsen?
This was very interesting, because as against adults where you have a lot of drugs, so maybe it is a blessing in disguise that because most of the drugs are not available for to be used in children, we were never faced with a dilemma of should we use remdesivir, should we use tocilizumab, because they are not licensed for children's use. So, we had very few things to play with. We just gave them good oxygenation, extremely good intensive care, and I am extremely grateful and in admiration of our intensive care staff, intensivists and nurses who really monitored this child very well. This child was on high flow nasal oxygen. The only drug which we gave was of course steroids, and surprisingly this child showed all signs of a cytokine storm. The IL-6 was very high and this child had CRP very high, and only drug other than oxygen given to this child was steroids.
And the child recovered.
Child is now on in the room on oxygen and will be discharged in a day or two. And this was just a 7-month-old child.
Coming to the question of children getting COVID infection, have you seen any case of vertical transmission from a mother who is COVID positive and a child coming COVID positive after delivery?
This is a highly debatable issue whether vertical transmission occurs with COVID. We had one such case, and the WHO or the health guidelines all over the world always have labeled this as a scenario where it could be highly probable case of vertical transmission, and we had exactly a similar case. A mother who was diagnosed COVID positive 7 days back with high grade fever came to the hospital with severe fetal distress, and emergency cesarean section was done. The baby was compromised, baby was put on ventilator, was intubated in the labor room, never came in contact with the mother and was immediately shifted to the COVID NICU. We took the secretions from the endotracheal tube and they were RT-PCR positive for COVID. If it could be argued that this was amniotic fluid which had just contaminated the endotracheal tube, so according to the WHO norms, we repeated a RT-PCR after 72 hours, which again was positive. This baby, we did an X-ray, we did a CT, and all showed signs which have been reported for adult COVID pneumonias. So, this baby also, normally these babies when we investigate them, we find them actually to have low inflammation, but this baby also showed high inflammatory markers, and so when we have reported this case immediately to the ICMR, and all experts even from abroad have commented to us that this was obviously a case of vertical transmission.
So, coming to this transmission of COVID from mother to the child, what is your policy of a COVID positive mother? Can she breastfeed her child, or the child is room separated, or the child is put on top feeds? So, what is the policy according to you as a pediatrician about the baby's safety of a COVID positive mother?
So, regarding this, we again started our protocols based on whatever international protocols we had, but then we also took into account the Indian situation, what is practical and what are the parents' issues. So, all over they said that there should be no reason why you should separate the baby and mother, or you should interrupt breastfeeding. People are very scared of this, but we started this policy and we asked the mothers, and all mothers are very keen to breastfeed their babies. So, babies were not only isolated, not isolated in another room, they were roomed in with the mother. The mother took due precautions of putting on a mask, of hand washing, of cleaning the breast, and the babies were breastfed right from the first moment. Not only that, we carried out all the normal neonatal practices of vaccinations, BCG, etc., newborn screening which are done for every other baby. And I am proud to say that we have had about 30 babies, 30 mothers who are delivered, COVID positive mothers delivered, all have been exclusively breastfed, and except for the vertical transmission case, no baby has been tested positive for COVID, and all the babies and mothers are fine. In fact, some of the babies have even come for their first vaccination at 6 weeks. The second important thing we did was basically we had an innovation of what is called as a neonatal box for resuscitation, because we always presumed that only adults generate aerosols, but now if you read some reports, in fact the pediatric patients have supposed to have a higher nasopharyngeal carriage. So, we devised a box for our NICU, and in fact this box, this innovation has been accepted and published in the latest article of Indian Pediatrics, and up till now no other center has been able to, because the boxes which were available were all the adult boxes. And as seen in the slide, this is a box which is devised by our own engineering department, and we have 6-7 boxes. It just took 7 days to prepare, and all babies who are COVID positive are managed or resuscitated or even transported to the respective wards in this box.
So, to summarize, the risk of separating a baby from the mother is more than the risk of breastfeeding and keeping the baby maybe not with the mother, but in the same room with the mother with due precautions, and you find that this worked out much better than separating the baby.
Yes, I feel the benefits of breastfeeding far outweigh the risks.
Okay. So, that is very interesting. Coming to the next section now is that children need vaccination. and due to COVID, the scare of COVID and children and parents not going outside their homes, is there any data on vaccination in DMH during the year 2019 versus vaccination in DMH in the year 2020? So we can understand if there is any deficiency in vaccination schedules that parents are observing.
I think we all agree that vaccinations are the biggest interventions which have benefited children's health. We went through our data of last year. So, March 2019 to May 2019, last year, the footfall for vaccination, that means number of children coming for vaccination to our DMH OPD were 1158. Remember that these children are possibly coming for multiple vaccines. So, some of them would be coming for 2 vaccines at a time, 3 vaccines. So, if you multiply, we are talking of about 2000, 3000, 4000 vaccines. And this year from March 2020 to May 2020, the number dropped down to 593, when actually our OPDs are, our number of patients of DMH are increasing, and normally we should have seen an increase. So, definitely this scare of visiting hospitals was there in the minds of people, and unfortunately on one hand we are encouraging them that don't come for trivial reasons, but they somehow felt that vaccinations also could be postponed, and so there was a lot of default in vaccinations, especially in infants, not realizing that the illnesses they are exposing their children to were far more serious than COVID.
So, at the end of May, did you change your strategy about this vaccination?
Yes, we realized that we have to not only educate parents, but make things very comfortable and safe for them. Fortunately, as pediatricians, we are always in touch with our patients. They are like we are like the family members. They keep on telling about their health. We have their WhatsApp number. They are in touch with us. So, while we are giving them telephonic consultations or reassurance, we all encourage them that you should not miss your vaccinations. We generated pamphlets to show how vaccinations help, and we decided that the reason they are not coming is quite understandable. They don't want to risk their child getting COVID. So, we created a separate vaccination OPD, and there is a separate room where they did not intermingle with other children, and we kept it open from 9 AM to 6 PM. And suddenly in June and July, I am happy to say in July we have again got back to our old figures of 1000 footfalls per month. So, once people are encouraged, we have to change according to what their fears are. It is not that they don't want to protect their children, but they don't want to protect at the risk of something else. So, I think this strategy has definitely helped us, and we are again back to our old vaccination routine.
So, to summarize about this pediatric COVID, you have now seen more than 260 pediatric COVID patients. Most of them were eligible for home isolation. About 4 children needed oxygen and 1 child needed high flow nasal oxygen for a prolonged time. So, overall COVID is not a kind of serious disease in children. Vertical transmission is possible, though it is very rare, but it is still possible. You need some innovations in neonatal intensive care unit to treat these children, and you have separated infrastructure and personnel for pediatric COVID and pediatric non-COVID. Your footfall for non-COVID cases has been low during this year, whereas the COVID numbers have been rising, and vaccination has been a major deficiency in the current context, which you have now corrected and probably our country needs to correct. So, all in all, I think it is an important message for all the parents who are watching at home. And coming to the last speculation now, this is not data based, but coming to the last speculation, my final closing question would be, should the schools start now? In what form should they start? And if they start, will there be spread of COVID either to the children or from children to their parents and grandparents? And is there any experience worldwide about these schools starting?
Yes, this is again a $1,000,000 question, highly debated by many people. There are people who say that the children's place is in the school and the playgrounds and not at home, and children could be compromised by or go into different psychological states by being at home. But you have to weigh it against the cons. There are at least 3 countries which are documented with numbers shown what had happened. Israel was one which was doing fairly well and suddenly they opened a school, and there was sudden increase in the COVID cases. France did the same. South Korea I would like to mention because they actually measured it. South Korea found that once they reopened the schools, the increase in COVID was increased tenfolds. Now the reason, it's not just about school going, that's not the issue. The issue is that when a child goes to school, the entire family goes to school. It is not just one person's exposure. Mother goes and drops the child, father goes and picks up the child, grandfather is waiting down when the child comes from bus, the child goes by a bus, child goes by a rickshaw. And believe me, if anybody who has dealt with child, I mean, to maintain or make a child maintain social distance is not improbable, it is impossible. So, once these children have been for 3 months at home, you let them loose in school and there is no way you can dictate any mode of conduct to them. Plus, they are going to come in contact with teachers. Secondly, whenever a child, you have seen that if one place in the world which is most crowded, schools, you just should go to a school before it opens, and when it closes, there are hundreds of people just lining to gather their children. And with this, especially in our Indian family system where grandparents stay at home, it was thought that children don't transmit infection, when children are known to be great transmitters. So, this is again my personal opinion shared by my colleagues, that this is probably, I think discretion is better than valor, and here it is better to defer our schooling till we get some control. And if I were to venture and stick my neck out, I would say at least till December we should not open our schools. You could do some bit of online schooling, you could do some schooling where some assignments can be given, and assignments could be checked, but I think that we should definitely discourage children or crowding of children in one place in a limited classroom, especially Indian classes which are about 50 to 60 per room, till things improve.
So, to close, I will just make 3 important observations. Number 1, pediatric COVID is not a serious disease except very occasionally. Number 2, vaccinations which are non-COVID routine vaccinations should not be missed during this period. And number 3, more likely than not, schools should be deferred in a country like India till December, till we get a grip on this disease. At present, I would say that children may not be at risk, but their grandparents and parents are definitely at risk, teachers are definitely at risk. So, it is better to be prudent than to be careless. Thank you.